What you needed to do is go to the ancient altar. It doesn't take many years to bring down revival. It takes humbling yourself. Do a little bit of research. Find out what are the ancient gateways and portals into this land. Oh my God. You think you're in Calabar for a mistake? You think that God brought you here out of mistake? You don't know that this is the ancient altar where God first passed through in the nation of Nigeria and West Africa. You don't know that this is the ancient gateway, the ancient altar, and the ancient covenant. Thank God for every other general that God has around outside of Calabar. But I want to tell you, God will not start a move of God in a new way. He will start from the ancient altar. When he finds the people who are ready to redig it, because those angels are still waiting to be stirred up and provoked. Kama Shakataya. And even the nation of Israel, when they were taken to Babylon and they were there for 70 years, when they returned back to Israel, to Jerusalem, the first thing they did was to rebuild the ancient altar. They didn't even build the temple. They didn't even lay the foundation of the temple. They didn't even build their houses first. The first thing they did was to rebuild. That was the altar where God appeared to David at the threshing floor of Aruna. And when David offered sacrifices, he saw with his eye the angel put away the sword. And angel said, David said, this shall be the altar where I will raise a house to God. That was the same altar that Solomon raised the temple. And when it was destroyed during the Babylonian invasion, 70 years later, the first thing they did, rebuild the ancient altar. Am I communicating? So let's take off now. All of that, I'm laying foundation. I'm laying foundation to help you to know that there are places in this earth when men have labored in the spirit to open up portals of revival. There are places and there are spots and there are locations, even in this land of Calabar, even in Cross River states, where men labor to open up the heavens to bring God down. If you're going to see God, you have to go back and honor the fathers. You have to go to the ancient altars. Because in those places there are angels of revival and there are angels of those covenants are waiting for men in our generation to align with them. Let me take you and stretch your mind a little bit to give you understanding. Are you aware that there are certain locations in the earth that when you enter those places, you don't pray too much? Are you aware there are certain places in this earth, no matter how you pray, you will not break through, because the veil of witchcraft is very heavy and blood, innocent blood, is speaking. And if you want to really fly, you need to leave those places and go to the place where there's an open heavens. And there are certain places in this earth that have a very high angelic traffic, because there are men who paid a heavy price. The number one portal in the whole world where men run to and they have easy access, angelic visitation and open heavens, is called the Mount of Olives, where our master King Jesus used to wake up a great while before it is day. And that Mount of Olives was his location of prayer and fasting. That Mount of Olives is where Jesus spends all night prayers. That is why it has been recognized those who are into the prophetic seer ministry and they want to have encounters, what they do is they fly to Israel and they spend some days and weeks in the Mount of Olives, and they start to have angelic visitations and visions and dreams. That was how I flew to Israel some years ago and went to the Mount of Olives and spent 3 days and 3 nights in the Mount of Olives. Those are ancient oil wells where the ancient father King Jesus opened for you and for me. And when you enter such territory, you don't pray too much. In the night, your heavens are open. You start to have the dreams you have never had before. It was in the Mount of Olives God connected me to collect all the ancient mantles of the Old Testament prophets: Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Amos, Obadiah, Zechariah, in the Mount of Olives. And the second highest portal in the earth, where the wells have already been opened, where you don't struggle, you just go there, and when you sleep there in the night, you have angelic visitation. It's called the Moravian Falls in North Carolina. That's where all the great prophets like Bob Jones, he spends time there and is transported to heaven. That is where all the seers like Anna Roundtree, in fact Anna Roundtree, she lives in the Moravian Falls. She lives there. That is where she was taken to heaven and given an ambassadorial appointment and was given the mantle of invisibility. A mantle, and she disappeared. And they gave her gloves, her hands, and they gave her shoe, her legs disappeared, and put a cape and her face disappeared. And that's how for 20 years nobody has seen her. But she's there in the cabin in the Mount Moravian. She just locks herself there. She intercedes for all the nations. She knows everything that is going on in the world. She prays for certain men of God because she is connected to heaven. The Moravian Falls. 1727, there was a man called Count Zinzendorf in Germany who started a 100-year non-stop 24/7 prayer meeting. That is every single day for 100 years, day and night. There are people who are gathering there for prayers for 100 years. And you are struggling to open a new portal when there are places where there are portals already. Look, if you can learn to enter the labors of the heroes past, that is how those Moravians, they relocated from Germany to North Carolina. And they continued that 100 years 24/7 prayer meeting. And they bought the whole of that mountain range, 100,000 acres. So anybody who goes to the Moravian Falls, this is no more 18th century, 19th century, we are in the 21st century, but there are ancient wells that was opened in the 17th century. That when you just go there and you hire a cabin and you sleep there in the night, heavens open, angels begin to visit you. Am I communicating? Welcome to Calabar, the ancient altar, the place where all the missionaries, where the gospel first entered. Not in Nigeria, the first place in the whole of West Africa and Black Africa. I hope you know that the first church and the first altar that was ever raised to God in West Africa is in this land. Why haven't you gone there? Don't you know that that is the altar that heaven is going to pass through again? Because God doesn't bypass the ancient altars. He doesn't come through a fresh move. He goes to the ancient altars that the ancient fathers opened. And you, the new generation, you have to redig the ancient wells. Maybe you don't know history. 1760, two Effiong princes were they were sold out in the slave trade, landed in America, landed in Bristol. Little Ephraim Robin and John Akondria from this Calabar, taken as slaves, landed in Bristol. That's the headquarters of John Wesley. And they came under the ministry of John Wesley and were converted by John Wesley and baptized in water by John Wesley. And their conversion was so powerful and so genuine that the Queen of England, Queen Victoria, gave those two Effiong slaves freedom from slavery. They are among the first 10 slaves that ever received freedom in the history of the slave trade from this land. And when they were given their freedom, they were asked, what do you want to do with your freedom? If you're studying history, go and pick up the books by Randy Sparks, the two princes of Calabar. He's a professor of history in US. He's the one who wrote this book. And when they were to come back, they asked, what do you want to do with your freedom? They said, we want to go back and evangelize our people because Africa is in darkness. And John Wesley, so moved by two who he has converted, returning back to the black Africa, he gave them his own Bible. You don't understand? That's the handing over of a baton of one revival for another revival. You still don't understand? So the first Bible that ever entered black Africa is the Bible of John Wesley. And that's how they landed on this beach, 1769, and began to evangelize their people until King Ao Honesty of Creektown and King Iyamba V now wrote a letter to Queen Victoria that you should also now send us people who will teach us the book and the word of God. And that was how on the 10th of April 1846 Hope Waddle and his team landed in Calabar with the second Bible, the Bible from Queen Victoria herself. And the first church service that was ever held in the whole of West Africa and Africa continent was held in Iyamba Street, just here in the Iron Palace of King Iyamba himself. And thereafter in 1850, the first altar that was ever raised to God in the whole of West Africa. You enter this water, 5 minutes, you land in Creektown, and you will see that first ancient altar built in 1850, where they fabricated the house and shipped that house down to this place and built the Presbyterian church. And 1852, the second altar in the whole of West Africa is this Egerton Street Presbyterian Church. And the third altar in the whole of West Africa is this Juketown, 1854. Am I communicating at all? Because I expect the youths of this generation to have understanding. I expect the youths of this generation to be going to these ancient altars to put a demand on what belongs to this territory to come. Oh God, help me here. Help me to communicate. God is not going to pass through another way. The gift and the calling of God is without repentance. If he came through this ancient gateway and he's coming again, it's still through this ancient gateway. He's only waiting for a generation who will understand and go and redig the old wells. Oh Father, help me here. And that was how 1876, the first covenants, where the king of this land was covenanted to God, and the whole of this territory was declared the defenders of the faith. Let me leave it. But a few days ago, I called for the land to come for 10 days prayer here. I called for the whole land. I sent messages everywhere that the time has come for us to cry unto God, like Acts of the Apostles, to open up the ancient well for revival. And we were here 10 days and 10 nights. We don't go anywhere. And I also send message everywhere. Please come on, because we are going to the ancient altars. That was how we moved to Creektown, to the first altar that was ever raised. I gave a call. I put it on all platforms. And we entered speedboats, about 7 speedboats, and chatted and went. Thank God for Papa Ephraim. Thank God for Apostle Inya Egbe. Ephraim is 60. Me, I'm 60 years. Apostle Inya Egbe is 70. Thank God for that woman of God of intercessors who followed us. She's in her 70s. Thank God for Dr. Ekpemi. He's 70 something. He followed us. Even the Presbyterian prelates for the whole of Nigeria. He was in Aba. He abandoned everything, came all the way down to lie flat on the ancient altar to cry. Thank God for Apostle Simon. He's 68. And I looked at all of us who went on that journey. I didn't see any youths. I saw only fathers in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and getting to 80s. We were about 100 of us. We went down there and lay on the altar and cried. And after we finished that one, we went to another ancient altar. And I have been announcing it here. And I've been sending the message. But it's like the youth of this generation, there's a disconnect. It's like the youth of this generation. You want God to come in your own way, not in the old way. It's like you want God to come in a way that you want him to come. God will not come your way. He will come through the ancient altars and the ancient wells. That's why God says he's looking for a generation where the hearts of the fathers will come to the sons and the sons will come to the fathers. Lest God will smite your generation with a curse. You don't dig fresh well. You go to the fathers and dig the old well. You know another altar we went to? I announced it here and I've been announcing it. And I was very shocked. No youths. No youths. Only old men and old women. We went to another altar in Creektown. The altar of Papa Cole. Papa Cole of Creektown. You know, that last move of God, after Azusa Street, there was a move called the healing move. The voice of healing, which Gordon Lindsay was in charge. And there were about 170 men of God who God raised with healing power and healing angels. Men like Jack Coe and A.A. Allen and Catherine Coleman and Kenneth Hagin and R.W. Shambach and all of those men, great men, 170 of them. T.L. Osborne, who shook the whole of this world with healing power. Since that time that those men died, there is no move again on the earth. All we are doing is church. But there's one man from this land. Before that healing movement broke out, there was a man called Franklin Hall who wrote a book called The Atomic Power of Fasting and Prayers. He wrote that book 1940 something. In that book, he discovered how Jesus went into the wilderness full of the Spirit on 40 days fasting and prayer, no food, only water, and he came out in the power